Our Holy Week journey continues. Our reading for today is from the Gospel according to St. John, chapter 13, verses 21 to 32. After saying this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and declared, "Very truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me." The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he was speaking. One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter therefore motioned to him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So while reclining next to Jesus, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." So when he had dipped the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. After receiving the piece of bread, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, "Do quickly what you are going to do." Now no one at the table knew why he said this to him. Some thought because Judas had the common purse, Jesus was telling him, "Buy what we need for the festival," or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the piece of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once." We have jumped a section of John's Gospel. We have skipped over the section of the Gospel which tells the story of Jesus washing the feet of the disciples. We'll come back to that story tomorrow, Maundy Thursday, when, under normal circumstances, the scene would be reenacted in services in churches throughout the world, where the feet of the members of the congregation are washed, and in turn they wash each other's feet to remind us all of our servant role. For now, though, we skip ahead to the scene where Judas leaves the group of disciples with the betrayal of Jesus firmly set in his mind. This is a picture of the betrayal of Jesus which is different in every way from that of the other Gospels. In those Gospels, Judas acts independently to betray Jesus out of disillusionment and greed. In this Gospel, it appears that Jesus has foreknowledge of Judas's intention, identifies who will betray him to the other disciples, and actively directs Judas's action. This is somewhat similar to the story of the betrayal of Jesus given in the Gnostic Gospel of Judas, thought to have been written in the 2nd century. On the usual reading of this Gospel, which first became available to the public in the 1970s, Judas is portrayed as the doer of God's will, rather than the villain of the Gospels. The whole question of the betrayal of Jesus is a complex one. Why was it necessary, given that the political and religious authorities of the day were plotting against him? Judas is a complex character. In the other Gospels, the precursor of the betrayal of Jesus was the acceptance of the actions of the woman anointing his feet with perfumed oil. In these Gospels, Judas is a thoroughly bad character. In this Gospel, as soon as Judas leaves, Jesus proclaims the hour of his glorification has come. So these are two entirely different understandings of the role of Judas's betrayal of Jesus. Many years ago, I read a series of Lenten studies written by George Appleton, the then Bishop of Jerusalem. He suggested that after Jesus' death, he would have searched for Judas until he found him, and would have immediately offered him forgiveness and fellowship. In this view, nothing and no one is beyond redemption.